Yo, what's up, guys? Today I just wanted to share a few of my favorite ways to make your top loops more interesting, particularly if you feel like you're dragging in loops and they're boring, or you can't really figure out how to sort of increase the energy of your track over time. This is helpful for kind of four on the floor music, techno, house, progressive, anything where there's a progression in the energy of the track, right? So pretty much I'm just going to play a piece of this track here, maybe 16 bars or so. Got all the perk layers in white. And if you guys dig it, then I'll just show you what's going on under the hood. So going back to the first 8 bars of this little sketch of a track here, pretty much start out super minimal, right? That's the key. As much as you can pull back on your top loop and still keep the groove of the track going, that's generally what you want to go for. So I've got just this closed hat main playing here. Simple little closed hat. And then in the next section of the track, it morphs into closed hat main 2, which sounds like this. Only difference being I've added the delay plugin. I've got about 30% dry wet. And this is pretty much my first and probably my favorite tip today is especially if you're just starting out, find an effect or two that is going to be part of your signature sound. And then always just sprinkle it onto your top loops, right? Every time I drag in a top loop, I'm always adding a little bit of delay on it. It kind of robotifies the sound a little bit and sort of, fits the branding of my sound. So with delay off, with it on. Right, so spend some time thinking about, what fits your sound. Maybe you want to make like super wet and wobbly, watery music like Tipper. You could reach for a phaser, right? And maybe you put, just a sprinkle of, phaser on all of your top loops. Maybe 15% dry wet. Find some sort of preset here. Right, and maybe that becomes, just a piece of all your top loops. The other good thing about having an effect on your top loops already is that you can use it to sort of build tension, right? With the delays here, I have it kind of increasing from section to section here, 60% to 80% feedback. If we wanted to really boost it before the end of a phrase, right? You'll hear DJs do that sometimes with the delay button on a mixer. It kind of sounds more robotified and metallicized as they go into a transition. So that's the first thing, right? Find an effect and just always sprinkle it onto all your top loops. The other thing is, as I mentioned, just starting out super minimal, right? So this is the first part of the track. Sometimes you can pull back even more. So maybe you could even high pass this hat, right? And just have the very highs playing in the first section. And then your next section could be this, right? So definitely just give yourself room to build, and that's going to make your main drop hit harder, right? So just pull back as much as you can in the intro. I've got about 10% dry wet on all of my main perks with a short decay, right? With it off, with it on, right? A little bit of room reverb sounds really good on perks. Another thing you can do is focus on layering, right? So right here, I've got this subtle top layer, 15K plus. If we just solo it and look at what's going on in the meter, right? It's just hitting above 15K here. So on top of our closed hat, sounds like this. With it off, with it on. Right? So there's not going to be much going on in the mix up there except for percussion, so you might as well fill the space, right? So other than that, I would say a couple more things. Making your groove sound humanized, right? So if you're dragging top loops and it's super static, it's just really boring, right? So a lot of times you need to become a bit of a drummer. You need to kind of play in some of your parts, meaning in these rides here, for example, I recorded these by just playing them in with my MIDI keyboard, right? So if you arm a track here in Ableton, press the red button. You can hear my dog barking. Maybe she doesn't like this tip. But yeah, you can see basically if you record and then play the metronome going, I'll just be pressing the button as the groove plays. So all of these were basically a little bit off the grid you see here. And that's exactly what would happen if a drummer was playing in the rides, right? They wouldn't be perfectly static. A lot of these loops that you're getting from sample packs, if you zoom in, they're all perfectly on the grid, right? And so if you have every single thing hitting on the grid, not only is it going to mean that you have overlapping transients and there's some clash, but it's not going to sound as human, right? So if you can play in one or two of your parts, it's definitely going to humanize it. Another thing is recording percussion. And this is one of my favorite things to do. I'm always recording stuff like around my house, like wherever I am, honestly, right? Right here, I've got this little coin flick. Sounds pretty cool, right? Not really something you'd find in a sample pack. It's something that I recorded, and it's something I drag into a lot of my projects. I also have these other coin flip sounds, which I drenched out in a bunch of reverb. So just listening here to this transition. The reverb adds a bunch of depth and space to the beat. And then also the coin flick, what I'll say is it just seems like the universe likes it whenever you record something and drag it in. I don't know. It's really strange, but that's been my experience. And then also you can have some sort of counter offsetting groove, right? So I've got this other subtle top loop here. And these offset groove hats, that are hitting at a different time. So if you solo this right here and boost the volume a lot. Right? A little offset groove, right? Instead of just having everything 4 on the 4. And also here in this loop, this is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, even though this was from a Project 8 sample pack, I pitched it up and I made it super plucky. So before I did that, it sounded like this. And then after I pitched it up and made it super plucky with the beats mode using this little singular arrow, it sounds like this now. So as far as I'm concerned, now this is my sound. I could save it to my sample library. I could sell this sound. No one's going to know that this was from a Project 8 sample pack. So constantly warp, stretch, pitch stuff around, going back to this idea of finding layers above, 15K. I'm usually warping stuff up a lot and trying to find layers like in the higher areas to fill in the spaces. But that's pretty much the gist of it. Just playing like one more piece here at the end so you can hear the progression. And I did forget one thing, and that's just the group processing. So if you see here, I've got the top perks group processing. Usually I'll do 3 stages for top perks. One would be just to fatten it. So I've got the drum bus with it off, with it on. It's giving us a little volume gain. There's some built-in compression here, I believe. But really my favorite part about the drum bus is the transient knob, right? Because you can either boost it or pull it back. So if you want softer perks, pull it back. If you want a little bit of a sharper transient, boost it. One thing to think about is like the contrast of transients with your other sounds. If you've got like a super plucky, transient-y lead, maybe you want your perks to be a bit softer and kind of contrast it. And other than that, I generally will just clip in stage 2. So this is going to save you some headroom. If we look on our meter here, get good old span going. With the clipping off, let's see where we're peaking, and then we'll turn it back on. Let me just solo this piece. So we're at like -1 with the clipper off, and then with it on, -3 or so, right? Maybe -2. The one thing you have to be careful with when you're clipping is it does sometimes introduce some low frequency information. So I'm going to turn off this EQ for a second, and you can see there's some stuff going down in the sub region, and we don't want that. The third stage is really just to fine tune, add some air. You can use these Mag EQ, Q3D, fresh air type plugins that are gonna just give you a little more presence. So we could say, 10K, let's boost the air gain. Fresh air is another good one. You can choose between mid-range and highs. Another one is erosion. Sometimes can be good on a bus if you want to add a little bit of noise. There's the noise presets. And other than that, sometimes I'll add some final compression after I've, fine-tuned a little bit, and that's pretty much the group processing. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, guys. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a bit of a deeper dive on perks, but generally, just to recap, start off minimal, right? As minimal as you can to give yourself space to build. Find an effect that's part of your signature sound. Record everything around your house in nature, etc., etc. Layer above 15K, right? Fill in the highest highs. And have a little bit of an offset, humanized groove, right? Play in some of your parts like a drummer. Add a little bit of reverb for a little bit of depth. And you're on your way. All right, friends, thanks for watching. And I'll see you at the next one. Peace.